By the time Ryan Carter saw his ex-wife under the flickering supermarket lights at 1:17 in the morning, Emily had already survived the kind of night that would have broken the woman he remembered. She stood beside her dented silver Honda in the far corner of the parking lot, the part where the bulbs buzzed like tired insects and the wind came hard across the asphalt with the bite of late November. In one hand, she held a plastic grocery bag with a half-gallon of milk, a loaf of store-brand bread, 2 bananas soft enough to be marked down, and a small bottle of children's fever medicine she had counted quarters to afford. In the other hand, she held her phone, its cracked screen glowing with a message from her 9-year-old son, Noah. Lily is sleeping now. I put the blue blanket on her. Emily read it twice, not because the words were complicated, but because they were the only gentle thing that had happened to her all day. Her feet ached from an 8-hour overnight shift at Willow Creek Senior Living, where she had changed linens, wiped down tables, stocked supply carts, and smiled at residents who sometimes mistook her for daughters who no longer visited. Her uniform smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. A strand of blonde hair had escaped from her ponytail and stuck to her cheek. She looked, to any passing stranger, like a tired woman leaving a tired place with tired groceries. That was exactly what Ryan saw when his black SUV rolled past the front of the store and stopped too smoothly beside her car. The passenger window lowered, and warm air spilled out with the soft scent of leather, cologne, and a life that had never had to choose between cough syrup and gas. Ryan leaned across the center console, his face lit by the dashboard, his dark coat open over a crisp white shirt. Beside him sat Madison, his new wife, polished and silent, her diamond ring flashing each time she adjusted the scarf around her neck. For a second, Emily thought about pretending she had not seen them, but poverty had taken enough from her. It would not take her spine too. Emily, Ryan said, drawing her name out like he had found something disappointing on a shelf. His eyes moved over her uniform, the groceries, the old car, the exhaustion she had not been able to hide. Still working nights? Madison looked away quickly, but not before Emily caught the pity in her face, that soft, expensive kind of pity that never cost the giver anything. Emily tucked the medicine deeper into the bag. The kids needed a few things. Ryan gave a short laugh, the same one he used to make when she talked about opening a bakery from their kitchen, back when he called it a cute little hobby and told her she had no idea how real business worked. I told you, Em, that business dream would fail. A few muffins and lunchboxes were never going to save you. The words landed in the cold air between them, sharp and familiar. For 5 years of marriage, Ryan had known exactly where to place a sentence so it would hurt without leaving a mark anyone else could see. Emily felt the old shame rise first, hot in her throat, then something else beneath it, quieter and stronger. Because Ryan did not know what was in the trunk of her car. He did not know about the 40 breakfast boxes packed in brown paper bags, each tied with twine and labeled Carter and Kids Kitchen in Lily's crooked crayon logo. He did not know that 3 nurses from Willow Creek had already paid for tomorrow's delivery, that a teacher from the elementary school had asked for 20 more by Friday, that Grace Miller at the corner cafe had cleared a tiny shelf near the register because Emily's banana bread sold out before noon. He did not know that every night he mocked had become a brick, and every brick had begun to look, impossibly, like a foundation. Emily shifted the grocery bag to her other arm and looked at the man who had once convinced her she was too small for her own dreams. Drive safely, Ryan, she said. That was all. No defense. No tears. No speech worthy of a movie scene. Because real dignity usually arrives without music. Ryan frowned, annoyed that she had not flinched properly. Madison touched his arm, and the SUV pulled away, its red taillights sliding across the wet pavement before disappearing into the dark road. Emily stood there until they were gone. Then she opened her trunk, checked the neat rows of breakfast boxes, and let out a breath that trembled only once. At home, Noah and Lily were sleeping on the pull-out couch because the small apartment's heater worked better in the living room. Emily would get 2 hours of sleep if she was lucky. At 4:45, she would rise again, warm the boxes, drive through the blue-black morning, and deliver food made by hands Ryan had called useless. She closed the trunk gently, as if not to wake the future waiting inside. The apartment was quiet when Emily pushed the door open at 2:06 in the morning, But it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the thin, careful silence of a home where everyone had learned not to need too much. The living room smelled faintly of children's shampoo, toaster crumbs, and the electric space heater humming beside the couch. Noah had fallen asleep sitting up, one hand still resting on Lily's blue blanket, as if guarding her from a world he was too young to understand but old enough to notice. Lily's cheeks were flushed, her blonde curls damp at the temples, her small mouth parted with the heavy sleep that came after fever medicine finally began to work. Emily stood in the doorway for a moment with the grocery bag cutting a red line into her fingers, and the sight of them nearly undid her. Not because they were suffering loudly. That would have been easier, somehow. It was the way they adapted. The way Noah had learned to warm soup in the microwave. The way Lily called their pull-out couch a campout so her mother would not feel guilty about the broken heater in the back bedroom. The way both of them stopped asking when their father was coming, because even children eventually understand the shape of absence. Emily set the groceries on the counter and moved quietly through the room, touching Noah's hair, then Lily's forehead. Better. Not perfect, but better. She exhaled for what felt like the first time since midnight. In the kitchen, beneath the yellow bulb that flickered whenever the refrigerator kicked on, 40 more labels waited beside a roll of twine and a stack of brown paper boxes. Carter, in Kid's Kitchen. The name still looked too hopeful for her life, like something printed for a woman who slept 8 hours and owned matching dishes. The first version had been drawn by Lily in purple crayon, a crooked little house with steam rising from the chimney. Noah had added the words underneath in careful block letters, his tongue caught between his teeth, proud in the serious way boys get when they are trying to become useful too soon. Emily had almost cried when she saw it, then immediately felt ridiculous because crying over a homemade logo at midnight was the sort of thing exhaustion did to people. Still, she had taped it above the stove. Not because it was professional, because it was true. She washed her hands, tied on an apron, and pulled the mixing bowls from the cabinet. The apartment's walls were thin enough that she could hear Mr. Alvarez downstairs coughing and the college girl next door laughing softly at something on television. Everyone else was living an ordinary night. Emily measured flour. Ordinary had become a luxury she could not afford, so she built routine instead. 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of oats, cinnamon, apples diced small so they could stretch across more muffins. She moved with the quiet precision of someone who had learned that panic wasted time. Her shoulders burned from the shift. Her lower back ached from standing. A faint blister had opened on her heel. She noticed all of it and kept going, because hunger did not pause for tired mothers, and Rent did not care that her daughter had a fever. Around 3:10, Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair flattened on one side, eyes half open. "Mom," he whispered. "I heard the oven." Emily turned down the mixer. "Go back to sleep, honey." He looked at the bowls, the boxes, the labels, then at her face. Children were terrible at pretending not to see pain. Adults had made a whole civilization out of it, naturally, but children still had standards. "Do you need help?" he asked. She wanted to say no. She wanted to preserve some soft part of his childhood, to keep business plans and overdue bills and exhausted mothers away from him. But she also knew the truth. He was already living inside the struggle. Refusing his help would not make him innocent. It would only make him lonely. "You can put stickers on the boxes," she said softly. His tired face brightened as if she had handed him a crown. He climbed onto the kitchen chair, bare feet tucked beneath him, and began pressing each label carefully onto the lids. Some were crooked. Emily did not fix them. At 4:32, when the first batch came out golden and warm, Lily stirred on the couch and mumbled for water. Emily carried it to her, brushed curls from her forehead, and felt the small hand catch her wrist. "Are we still poor, Mommy?" The question was not dramatic. It was worse. It was curious, honest. A child trying to name the weather inside their life. Emily swallowed, crouching beside her. "We are working our way somewhere better." Lily blinked sleepily. "With muffins?" Noah looked up from the table, waiting for the answer too. Emily glanced back at the oven, at the boxes, at the label her children had made, at the apartment Ryan would have called pathetic if he could see it. Then she smiled, tired but real. "With muffins," she said. "And with us." By 5:18 that morning, the sky over Maple Hollow had begun to soften from black to a bruised winter blue, and Emily was driving with the heat turned low to save gas. one hand on the wheel, and the other wrapped around a travel mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm before she ever took the first sip. The 40 breakfast boxes sat in the back seat and trunk, filling the old Honda with the smell of cinnamon, baked apples, and warm oats. It was the kind of smell that belonged in a home with clean counters and Sunday sunlight, not in a car with a check engine light glowing like a tiny orange thread on the dashboard. Still, Emily let herself breathe it in. For a few minutes, before the school drop-off line, before Willow Creek called asking if she could cover another shift, before the landlord's reminder landed in her inbox, the car smelled like possibility. Her first stop was the side entrance of Willow Creek Senior Living, where the night staff usually slipped out like ghosts and the morning staff arrived with damp hair and paper cups of coffee. Linda Perkins, the charge nurse who had placed the first real order, was waiting under the awning in purple scrubs, rubbing her hands together against the cold. "You are a lifesaver," Linda said as Emily lifted 2 insulated bags from the back seat. Emily smiled, the automatic kind at first, but then Linda opened one box right there, took in the muffin, the boiled egg, the little container of fruit, and the handwritten note tucked beneath the napkin, and her face changed. "Emily, this is not just breakfast." The sentence caught Emily off guard. Compliments still made her suspicious, as if kindness might be a bill that arrived later. "It is nothing fancy," she said. Linda looked at her over the lid of the box. "That is not what I said." Inside the building, 2 aides gathered near the nurse's station, then 3, then 6. Someone took a picture. Someone else asked whether Emily could do gluten-free options. A tired respiratory therapist bought 2 extra boxes for his kids. By the time Emily walked back to her car, her phone had buzzed 7 times with new messages, and she had $22 in cash tucked into the pocket of her coat. $22 would not change a life. Humanity, being deeply committed to making survival mathematically insulting, had arranged things that way. But it would buy gas. It would buy eggs. It would buy one more day of not giving up. At 6:05, she pulled up behind Grace Miller's Cafe on Cedar Street, a narrow brick building with fogged windows and a bell over the front door that sounded cheerful even when the world did not deserve it. Grace was already inside, tying her red hair into a messy knot while the espresso machine hissed like an impatient cat. She had been Emily's friend since high school, back when Emily still believed adulthood would be difficult in interesting ways, not difficult in the specific way of comparing the price of laundry detergent buyouts. Grace unlocked the back door and took one look at Emily's face. "You slept how long?" "Enough to remain legally alive." Grace gave her a flat stare. "That is not a number." Emily carried in the last 12 boxes and set them on the little shelf Grace had cleared beside the register. Above it, Grace had taped a handwritten sign, "Carter and Kids Kitchen. Local breakfast boxes, made fresh before sunrise." Emily stared at the sign longer than she meant to. The words looked too official, almost embarrassing in their faith. "You did not have to make a sign," she said. "Yes, I did," Grace replied. "People need to know what they are buying." "Muffins." A woman with a backbone, apparently. Emily shook her head, but the laugh that escaped her was real, small and rusty from lack of use. The first customer came in at 6:22, a bus driver named Marlene who bought coffee every morning and knew everyone's business with the sacred confidence of a woman who had driven generations of children through snowstorms. She picked up one box, squinted at the label, and said, "This yours, Emily?" Emily braced herself, though for what, she did not know. Judgment had made a home in her body. "Yes, ma'am." Marlene placed 2 boxes on the counter. "Then I will take these. My grandson says your banana bread tastes like somebody's grandma still loves him." Grace turned away quickly, pretending to wipe the espresso machine. Emily looked down because if she looked up, she might cry in front of a breakfast display, and there were already enough strange local events in Maple Hollow without adding that one. By 7:10, the shelf was empty. Grace sold the last box to a man in a County Road Department jacket who said his wife had been telling him to stop buying gas station breakfast. And by the time the cafe doors swung shut behind him, Emily was standing beside the empty shelf with both hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Empty shelves had frightened her for years. Empty pantry shelves. Empty gas tanks. Empty bank accounts. But this shelf, bare except for a few crumbs and one crooked label Noah had pressed onto the wood by mistake, felt different. It did not mean there was nothing left. It meant something had moved. Something had been wanted. Grace leaned her hip against the counter and watched Emily in that way she had, half tender, half ready to insult her into accepting reality. You understand what just happened, right? Emily looked at the shelf. People were hungry. People are always hungry. That is not a business plan. This was demand. Emily almost laughed at the word. Demand sounded like something Ryan used in conference calls, something people said in rooms with glass walls and catered lunches. It did not sound like her kitchen with the flickering bulb, or Noah rubbing sleep from his eyes while lining up labels, or Lily asking if muffins could carry them somewhere better. I have to get the kids ready for school, Emily said, because practical sentences were safer than hopeful ones. And I have a shift tonight. Grace slid a folded piece of receipt paper across the counter. On it were 6 names, 4 phone numbers, and 3 notes written in Grace's quick, slanted handwriting. Maple Hollow Elementary front office wants 12 boxes Friday. Pastor Elaine wants to ask about Sunday volunteer breakfast. Marlene wants 6 banana breads if possible. Emily stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Grace. Do not grace me. I am merely documenting the collapse of your stubborn denial. Emily pressed her lips together, fighting the sudden burn behind her eyes. Crying in public before 8 o'clock in the morning felt excessive, even by the generous emotional standards of small-town cafes. Grace softened anyway. You do not have to become some empire by tomorrow. Just call it what it is. People like what you make. Emily wanted to believe that, but belief had become expensive. Ryan had spent years taxing it out of her in small daily charges. A comment about how she folded laundry wrong. A sigh when she asked about money. A smile that made her feel childish whenever she mentioned recipes, menus, or a small storefront with yellow curtains and a chalkboard sign. He never had to forbid her dreams outright. He simply made them feel embarrassing enough to put away. That was the trick of a certain kind of person. They did not always lock the door. Sometimes they just convinced you the room was not yours. At 7:36, Emily drove back to the apartment with the receipt paper on the passenger seat and a strange, fragile pressure in her chest. The sun had climbed above the roofs, pale and cold, laying a thin gold line over the frost on parked cars. Maple Hollow was waking up in ordinary pieces, school buses sighing at corners, garage doors grinding open, sprinklers clicking uselessly over frozen lawns because somebody's timer had lost its mind, naturally. Emily parked outside the brick apartment building and carried herself up the stairs on legs that felt borrowed. Inside, Noah was already packing Lily's backpack. He had put her folder in the wrong pocket and her snack in sideways, but he had done it with such solemn focus that Emily did not correct him. Lily sat at the small kitchen table in pink pajamas, her fever lower now, her cheeks still warm but her eyes brighter. Did people eat them? She asked before Emily could even take off her coat. Emily pulled the folded receipt paper from her pocket and laid it on the table like evidence in a trial she was only beginning to understand. They did, and some people want more. Noah's face changed first. Not joy exactly, but relief, as if some private burden he had been carrying had shifted by 1 inch. Lily picked up the paper and studied it upside down. So the muffins worked? Emily looked at her children, at the kitchen still dusted with flour, at the sink full of bowls waiting for hands that desperately needed rest. She thought of Ryan in his warm SUV, of his voice under the supermarket lights, of the certainty he wore like a tailored coat. Then she thought of the empty shelf at Grace's cafe. They helped, she said. Noah smiled. Can I make more labels after school? Emily wanted to tell him to focus on being 9, to worry about spelling tests and soccer cleats, and whether Lily had stolen his markers again. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Only after homework. He nodded, accepting the condition like a business partner. That afternoon, after school drop-off and 2 hours of sleep that felt more like blinking, Emily called Maple Hollow Elementary from the edge of her bed. Her voice shook only once as she asked for the front office manager. When the woman on the other end said they had heard wonderful things and wanted to try a small breakfast order for Friday, Emily wrote every word down in a notebook she had once bought for grocery lists. 12 boxes. Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning. Possible weekly order. She stared at that last phrase for a long time. Possible weekly order. 3 words, plain as cardboard. But they opened something in her chest that fear had kept boarded up for years. Then her phone buzzed with Ryan's name. Ryan's name sat on Emily's phone like a small dark stone, heavy with all the old reflexes it still knew how to wake. For 3 seconds, she only stared at it. The apartment was silent except for the dryer thumping unevenly in the closet and Lily humming to herself at the table while coloring a sun with blue rays, because 6-year-olds have not yet been properly trained by society to respect the laws of nature. Noah had gone back to school with his backpack hanging crookedly from one shoulder, proud because he had carried the empty mixing bowls to the sink before leaving. Emily's thumb hovered over the screen. She told herself she did not have to answer. She owed Ryan information about the children, not access to her peace. But then she thought of Friday's possible school order, of the grocery list already forming in her head, of the $22 in her coat pocket, and something in her steadied. She swiped to answer. Hello. Ryan did not greet her. He rarely wasted charm when no audience was present. So now you are selling food at Grace's place? Emily closed her eyes for half a second. Maple Hollow was small, and gossip traveled through it faster than emergency alerts. Good morning to you too, Ryan. Do not do that, he said. Do not act cute. Madison saw a post online. Somebody put up a picture of your little boxes. Little boxes. He made the word sound like toys left on a floor. Emily looked at the notebook on her bed, at the line where she had written possible weekly order, and placed her palm over it, as if shielding a flame from wind. People bought breakfast. That is not a crime. It is not a business either. His voice carried that old smooth certainty, the tone he had used when explaining mortgages, taxes, investment accounts, and her own limitations back to her, as if she were a child who had wandered into adulthood by accident. Emily, listen to me. You are exhausted. You are emotional. You are trying to prove something because you saw me last night. There it was, the beautiful arrogance of a man who believed every woman's decision was secretly about him. Somewhere, a committee of mediocre husbands was surely applauding. Emily walked into the kitchen so Lily would not hear the edge in her voice. This started before last night. With what? Banana bread and homemade labels? Come on. You know how many small food businesses fail? Do you have permits? Insurance? A commercial kitchen? A tax plan? Or are you just hoping sympathy pays the bills? The questions hit their marks because some of them were fair, which made them crueler. Emily did not have everything. She had a notebook, a borrowed shelf, an old oven, and a body running on coffee and stubbornness. She had no cushion, no investor, no neat 5-year strategy printed on glossy paper. She had children who needed shoes and a landlord who sent reminders in polite sentences that meant the opposite of polite. For one breath, Ryan's voice turned the kitchen around her smaller, shrinking it back into the narrow space he had once assigned her. Then she saw the flowers still dusting the counter, pale as morning frost. She saw Lily's crayon logo taped above the stove. She saw the text from Maple Hollow Elementary waiting in her notebook like proof that the world had answered her in a language louder than Ryan. I am learning, she said. Ryan laughed softly. Learning with what time? You work nights. You have the kids. You can barely keep up as it is. Emily gripped the edge of the counter, not because she was weak, but because composure sometimes needed furniture. Is this why you called? To check on my schedule? I called because I do not want you embarrassing yourself. Or the kids. The sentence went cold inside her. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold enough to clarify everything. Ryan had not called to protect Noah and Lily. He had called because her effort made his judgment less comfortable. If she failed, he could keep believing he had been right to leave. If she succeeded, then maybe he had not escaped a helpless woman. Maybe he had abandoned a capable one. The kids are proud. Of me? Emily said. They are children. They do not understand. No, she said, her voice low and steady now. They understand more than you think. There was a pause on the other end, small but satisfying. Emily, I have to go. Lily needs lunch, and I have orders to plan. She ended the call before he could answer, then stood in the kitchen with her heart beating hard against her ribs. Her hand trembled when she set the phone down, but only a little. From the table, Lily called. Mommy, can the sun be blue? Emily looked at the taped logo, the empty bowls, the notebook, the life that still looked fragile but was no longer silent. Today it can, she said. The call from Ryan should have left Emily shaken for the rest of the day. A year earlier, it would have. A year earlier, she would have replayed every word until his voice became bigger than her own thoughts, until even the apartment walls seemed to agree with him. But that afternoon, while Lily colored a blue sun and the dryer thumped like it was auditioning for mechanical failure. Emily opened her notebook and began writing down everything Ryan had thrown at her, as if his criticism had accidentally arrived wearing a useful coat. Permits, insurance, commercial kitchen, tax plan. The words looked intimidating in blue ink, stiff and official, like they belonged to people with accountants and matching file folders. Emily had neither. She had a shoebox under the bed with receipts from flour, eggs, oats, paper boxes, and gas stations. She had a checking account that seemed personally offended by the concept of money remaining inside it. She had 2 children, 1 old oven, 1 borrowed cafe shelf, and a body that had forgotten what rested felt like. Still, she wrote the list. Not because Ryan had been kind. He had not. But because even a man trying to shrink you might accidentally point toward the next door you need to open. Humanity remains irritatingly inefficient that way. At 3:15, before school pickup, Emily called the county health department from her kitchen table. Her hand was damp around the phone, and she had to clear her throat twice before asking what a home baker needed to sell breakfast boxes. Legally in town. The woman on the other end, a patient clerk named Denise, did not laugh. She did not sigh. She explained cottage food rules, labeling requirements, temperature safety, business registration, and the difference between baked goods she could prepare at home and items that required a licensed kitchen. Emily wrote so quickly her wrist cramped. Some answers were disappointing. The boiled eggs would have to go unless she used an approved kitchen. Cut fruit had restrictions. Certain fillings were not allowed. The little breakfast boxes she had imagined suddenly became a maze of rules and forms, because apparently even Hope needed paperwork in triplicate. But Denise also said something Emily held on to after the call ended. "You sound serious, honey. Serious people can learn this. Serious people can learn this." The sentence settled somewhere Ryan's insults had not reached. At 4 o'clock, Emily picked up Noah and Lily from school. Noah climbed into the car with a spelling test folded carefully in his backpack and immediately asked, "Did Dad call because of the muffins?" Emily glanced at him in the rearview mirror. His face was too careful, his eyes lowered toward his sneakers. She hated that he had learned to read adult tension like weather. "He had opinions," she said. Noah nodded, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "He always does." Lily, still pale but energetic enough to be outraged by injustice, kicked her boots lightly against the back of the passenger seat. "Did he say the blue sun was wrong too?" Emily laughed before she could stop herself. It came out tired, cracked around the edges, but real. "No, sweetheart. The blue sun survived." That evening, after sandwiches, homework, and Lily falling asleep with 1 sock on and 1 sock mysteriously missing, Emily spread her notes across the kitchen table. Noah sat beside her with a sharpened pencil, drawing new versions of the logo while pretending not to watch her face. "We have to change some things," she told him. "No eggs in the boxes for now. No cut fruit, unless we use Grace's kitchen the right way. Maybe muffins, breads, granola bars, and sealed applesauce cups." Noah considered this with the gravity of a board member who had recently mastered multiplication. "Can we make cinnamon oat bars?" "Maybe. They would stack better." Emily looked at him. "That is actually a good point." He tried not to smile and failed completely. At 9:40 that night, she went to Willow Creek for her shift with a notebook tucked into her bag between her lunch and a clean pair of socks. The hall smelled of lemon cleaner and warmed soup. Linda found her near the supply closet and said 3 more nurses wanted Friday boxes. Emily explained the menu changes, expecting disappointment. Instead, Linda shrugged. "Make what you can make safely. We are not ordering from you because of boiled eggs, Emily." Emily looked down, suddenly busy with a stack of towels. "Then why?" Linda's voice softened. "Because your food feels like somebody remembered we are human before sunrise." For a moment, Emily could not answer. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. Somewhere down the hall, a call bell chimed. Her feet already hurt, and the night had barely begun. But inside her bag was a notebook full of rules, orders, costs, and 1 sentence underlined twice. Serious people can learn this. By midnight, between changing linens and restocking gloves, Emily was no longer thinking about Ryan's laughter. She was calculating flour by the pound. Friday arrived with the kind of cold rain that made Maple Hollow look like it had been washed in dishwater. All gray roofs, shining sidewalks, and school buses coughing at the corners. Emily had been awake since 3:42 in the morning, not because her alarm had gone off, but because anxiety had climbed into bed before it and started tapping her on the shoulder like a rude little accountant. 12 boxes for Maple Hollow Elementary did not sound like much when spoken aloud. 12 was a number children learned before kindergarten. 12 was a carton of eggs, a jury, a dozen roses, a perfectly reasonable amount of anything until it became the first order from a school office that might turn into a weekly account. Then 12 became a mountain wearing a paper lid. By 5:30, the apartment kitchen was warm and bright, its windows fogged from the oven, its counters lined with cinnamon oat bars, banana muffins, sealed applesauce cups, napkins, and labels Noah had finished the night before with the seriousness of a man signing international treaties. Lily sat wrapped in her blue blanket on the couch, fever gone now, watching cartoons with the volume low and announcing every few minutes that she was the quality inspector. This mostly meant she wanted samples. Emily gave her half a muffin and told her the position did not include unlimited benefits. That seems unfair, Lily said, because apparently organized labor starts early. Noah stood on a chair at the table, checking each box against the list. 12 for the school, 6 for Linda, 4 for Grace's shelf, and 2 extra in case someone asks. Emily looked at him over the rim of her coffee mug. When did you become better at inventory than I am? He shrugged, pleased despite himself. Math is easier when it is food. At 6:18, the first problem appeared. The cardboard sleeve on one box tore straight across the corner, taking Lily's crooked sun logo with it. Emily froze for half a second longer than the situation deserved, because exhaustion had a talent for making small disasters feel symbolic. Noah quietly reached for another label. We have extras. The way he said it, calm and practical, nearly broke her heart. Children should not have to become the steady voice in a kitchen at dawn. And yet there he was, saving the morning with a sticker. At 6:52, Emily carried the insulated bags into the elementary school office, rain clinging to her coat and a strand of hair stuck to her cheek. The front office smelled like copier toner, wet backpacks, and the faint sweetness of cafeteria syrup. Mrs. Donnelly, the office manager, stood from behind her desk, a round woman with silver glasses on a chain and the alert kindness of someone who had spent 20 years knowing which children came to school hungry and which parents were trying not to look desperate. You must be Emily, she said. These smell wonderful. Thank you for giving me a chance. Emily hated how small her voice sounded. Mrs. Donnelly opened one box, looked at the neat oat bar, the muffin, the applesauce, the napkin, folded into a triangle because Noah had insisted presentation mattered, and smiled. Honey, this is not a chance. This is breakfast. The sentence was simple, but it pressed warmth into Emily's chest. A teacher passing through the office bought one of the extra boxes after smelling the muffins. Then the school counselor asked whether Emily could provide 25 boxes for a staff meeting the next Friday. Emily wrote it down with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy. 25. Not 12. 25. The number sat on the page like a door opening. By 7:24, she was back in the Honda, rain tapping the windshield, $20 in cash in the cup holder, and a new order in her notebook. She should have felt happy. She did, somewhere beneath the layers of fatigue. But happiness had to fight through the more immediate reality that she still had to drop the children off, sleep for 90 minutes, return a call from Denise at the county office, buy flour, and work another night shift. Success, she was learning, did not arrive like a parade. It arrived like one more responsibility wearing better shoes. Her phone buzzed just as she pulled away from the curb. It was not Ryan this time. It was a message from an unknown number with a photo attached. The picture showed one of her breakfast boxes on a teacher's desk beside a paper cup of coffee. Under it, the message read, Mrs. Donnelly gave me your number. I run the parent volunteer breakfast at the church. Could you handle 100 boxes next month? Emily stared at the screen until the car behind her gave a polite tap of the horn. 100. The word did not feel like a number. It felt like weather changing. She set the phone down carefully, pulled into traffic, and whispered to the empty passenger seat. I need a bigger kitchen. By the time Emily pulled into Grace Miller's back lot at 8:03 that morning, the question of 100 boxes had become less of a number and more of a creature sitting in the passenger seat, staring at her with unreasonable expectations. Grace was unloading oat milk from her hatchback when Emily stepped out into the rain, holding her notebook against her chest beneath her coat. One look at Emily's face and Grace stopped mid-lift. Either somebody died or somebody ordered too many muffins. Emily held up the phone. Grace read the message twice, her eyebrows climbing higher each time. 100 boxes? Next month, Emily said. For the church volunteer breakfast. Grace looked from the phone to Emily, then toward the small cafe kitchen glowing through the back window. Well, my kitchen is licensed. Emily blinked rain from her lashes. Grace, do not use my name like a warning label. You need a bigger kitchen. I have one sitting here after closing, mostly being used by me to eat leftover scones and make terrible dating choices on the internet. Emily should have laughed, but the kindness hit too close to the fragile place exhaustion had left exposed. I cannot pay what that is worth. Then we make an arrangement. You cover utilities for the hours you use it, clean it better than I do, and when you become a breakfast monarch, you remember who donated the first battlefield. Emily stared at her friend, unable to speak for a moment. People had helped her before in tiny ways. A ride, a hand-me-down coat, a bag of groceries left anonymously outside the apartment door one Christmas. But this was different. This was not charity tossed gently over the fence of her life. This was someone opening a gate and saying, "Walk through." I do not know how to do this, Emily admitted. The rain tapped against the hood of her car, soft and relentless. Grace's face changed, losing its joke for a second. Nobody does it first. That is why the species invented learning, then immediately ruined it with paperwork. Inside the cafe, the morning rush had faded into a low murmur of spoons against ceramic cups and wet boots squeaking on old tile. Grace poured Emily fresh coffee and spread the notebook open on the counter. Together they made lists. Equipment, ingredient costs, delivery times, menu items that complied with the county rules. A second cooler, more labels, a simple website, business registration. Emily wrote each item slowly, as if writing too fast might scare the future away. By noon, she had called Denise at the county office again, left a message for a small business advisor at the public library, and priced bulk oats, flour, and paper boxes from a restaurant supply store 30 miles away in Fairview. Every answer created 2 more questions. Every cost made her stomach tighten. But the fear had shifted. It no longer felt like a wall. It felt like stairs, steep ones, badly lit, probably built by a committee, but stairs all the same. That afternoon, after school, Noah and Lily sat at a corner table in the cafe while Emily helped Grace wipe down counters. Lily had drawn a new sign on printer paper, Carter and Kids Kitchen, built before sunrise. The letters leaned in different directions, as if they were all rushing somewhere important. Noah studied the church order with a pencil tucked behind his ear. If we make 100 boxes and each box gets 1 muffin, that is 100 muffins. Lily looked horrified. That is too many muffins. They will become a muffin army. Noah considered this with complete seriousness. Then we need trays. Emily stopped wiping the counter and looked at them. The cafe windows had fogged from the warmth inside, blurring the gray world beyond the glass. Her children were laughing now, not because life had become easy, but because Hope had entered the room wearing an apron and carrying a calculator. For the first time in years, Emily could picture a future that did not begin with surviving the next bill. She could see a rented kitchen after hours, rows of boxes cooling on metal racks, Noah counting labels, Lily drawing suns in impossible colors, Grace pretending not to be proud, and herself moving through it all with tired hands and a heart that had finally stopped asking Ryan for permission. At 5:47, just as Emily was packing the children's backpacks, her phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Madison. It said, "Ryan is telling people you are doing this for attention. I thought you should know." Madison's message stayed on Emily's screen while the cafe noise moved around her, cups clinking, chairs scraping, the espresso machine hissing as if it too had opinions about small-town gossip. "Ryan is telling people you are doing this for attention. I thought you should know." Emily read it once, then again, because the first reading went straight to the old wound and the second found the scar tissue around it. Attention. That was the word men like Ryan used when a woman stopped disappearing politely. When she cried, she was dramatic. When she endured, she was weak. When she stood up, she wanted attention. Humanity had really built an entire vocabulary to make courage sound inconvenient. Grace noticed the change in Emily's face from behind the counter and came over with a towel still in her hand. What happened? Emily turned the phone so Grace could see. Grace read it, and her mouth flattened into a line so sharp it could have sliced pie crust. I hope his pillow is warm on both sides forever. Emily almost smiled, but the feeling did not reach very far. Across the cafe, Noah was helping Lily stuff crayons back into a pencil pouch, and Emily felt that familiar maternal instinct to hide every ugly adult thing before it touched them. But Noah looked up too quickly. He had seen her face. He always saw too much. Is it Dad? He asked. Emily slipped the phone into her coat pocket. It is just grown-up noise. Noah did not believe her. 9-year-olds are still young enough to want dinosaurs on pajamas and old enough to recognize a lie wrapped in protection. Is he mad about the business? Lily frowned, holding a green crayon in one hand. Why would he be mad about breakfast? Grace muttered, a question philosophers have failed to answer. Emily shot her a look, but it was too late. Noah's shoulders had already tightened. That was the part Ryan never understood. His words did not stop at Emily. They leaked. They found the children in the corners of rooms, in the pauses after phone calls, in the way their mother took a breath before saying everything was fine. Emily knelt beside them, ignoring the ache in her knees. Your dad has his own feelings about what I am doing. Those feelings are not your job. Noah looked at the floor. He said stuff like that before. When you made the peach cake for Mrs. Talbot's birthday, he said you were wasting time. Emily remembered. She had stayed up late decorating that cake with cream cheese frosting and thin peach slices arranged like petals. Ryan had walked through the kitchen, glanced at it, and said she worked harder for compliments than for common sense. At the time, she had laughed softly, pretending it did not hurt. There should be a national monument for all the women who have laughed to keep the peace. He was wrong, Emily said, and the words felt strange because she was not adding maybe or probably or trying to be fair. He was wrong then, and he is wrong now. Lily leaned closer. But people like the muffins. They do, Emily said. And even if they did not, trying would still not be shameful. Noah absorbed that with the serious quiet he used when storing something important. Later, after Emily dropped the children at home with Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs, she drove to Willow Creek for another night shift under a sky the color of wet cement. By 10:30, she was folding towels in the laundry room when she heard 2 aides talking near the vending machine. Ryan Carter told my cousin she is only selling food because she wants sympathy after the divorce, one said. I heard that too, said the other. Emily stood still with a towel in her hands, heat rising up her neck. Then Linda's voice cut in from the hallway, calm as a locked door. Funny, I ordered from her because the food is good, she shows up on time, and she treats people with respect. That is more than I can say for half the men in this town with business cards. Silence followed. Beautiful silence. The kind no money could buy. Emily pressed the folded towel to her chest and closed her eyes. She had spent so long believing survival had to be private, that dignity meant absorbing humiliation without making a sound. But maybe dignity could also be this, letting people who knew the truth speak it in rooms where she was too tired to defend herself. At midnight, during her break, Emily opened her notebook and wrote one sentence beneath the growing list of orders and costs. I will not shrink to make him comfortable. Then she turned the page and began planning 100 boxes. The church order changed the shape of Emily's days. Not dramatically, because life rarely has the decency to transform with a soundtrack, but in small practical ways that made every hour feel assigned before she reached it. By Monday morning, the notebook that had once held grocery lists was divided into sections with paper clips and sticky notes. Ingredients, costs, county rules, cafe kitchen schedule, delivery routes, school orders, church order, and a page titled Things I Do Not Understand Yet. That page was getting crowded. She took the children to school, slept from 8:40 to 10:05, woke with the imprint of her sleeve across her cheek, and drove to the public library for a free small business appointment with a retired accountant named Mr. Feldman, who wore suspenders, smelled faintly of peppermint, and looked at her shoebox of receipts with the expression of a man who had survived both tax law and human optimism. This is a beginning, he said carefully. Emily braced herself. That means it is bad. It means it is a shoebox. So bad, but with cardboard. His mouth twitched. Manageable. We can work with manageable. For the next hour, he showed her how to track expenses, separate personal money from business money, calculate cost per box, and price her food without apologizing for needing profit. That last part was harder than the math. Emily had spent years treating her own labor like something that should be discounted because it came from her hands. Ryan had praised ambition when it wore his name, but when it wore hers, he called it unrealistic. Mr. Feldman tapped his pencil against the page. You cannot build a sustainable business by charging people only for ingredients. Your time counts. Emily looked down at her hands, rough from sanitizer, dish soap, flour, and winter air. I am not used to thinking that way. Most good people are not. That is why so many of them go broke, making everyone else comfortable. It was blunt, almost rude, and exactly the kind of sentence a library should probably issue with a warning label. Emily wrote it down anyway. That afternoon, she opened a separate checking account at Maple Hollow Community Bank with $187 and a banker named Priya, who did not treat the amount like a joke. Priya helped her file the business name paperwork online, explained a basic sales tax account, and printed a temporary confirmation page that Emily held in both hands like it was heavier than paper. Carter and Kid's Kitchen was no longer only Lily's crayon drawing taped above the stove. It existed somewhere in the machinery of the state, tiny and fragile, but real enough to have a confirmation number. When Emily picked up Noah and Lily, she handed them the page in the car. Noah read the first line twice. Lily could not understand most of it, but she recognized the name and gasped as if the governor himself had endorsed muffins. Are we official? She asked. Emily smiled at the rearview mirror. A little official. Can something be a little official? Noah asked. Apparently. The government has layers. Like lasagna, Lily said. Less delicious, Emily replied. By Wednesday evening, Grace gave Emily a key to the cafe's back door on a key ring shaped like a strawberry. This is not symbolic, Grace said, placing it in Emily's palm. It is deeply symbolic, Emily said. Unfortunately, yes, but I was trying to avoid feelings. After closing, Emily stood alone in the licensed kitchen for the first time. Stainless steel counters reflected the overhead lights. The ovens were wide enough to hold trays she had only seen in catalogs. The walk-in refrigerator hummed with quiet authority. It was not glamorous. There were scuff marks on the floor, a dent near the prep sink, and one drawer that stuck unless kicked gently with the side of a shoe. But to Emily, it looked like an answer. She set her notebook on the counter, tied on her apron, and began measuring oats for test batches. At 10:14, while the first tray cooled, her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Heard you are renting Grace's kitchen now. Be careful taking on things you cannot handle. Emily read it once. Then she placed the phone face down beside the flour scale and kept working. The muffins rose in neat golden rows, indifferent to his concern. By the end of that week, Emily had learned that a business did not grow like a flower, despite what motivational posters seemed determined to suggest. It grew like laundry, multiplying when no one was looking and demanding attention at the worst possible hour. The church order sat on her calendar circled in blue ink. 100 boxes due the following Saturday at 7:30 in the morning, and every day between now and then felt like a narrow bridge she had to cross while carrying flour, children, bills, and whatever remained of her sanity. She worked her overnight shifts at Willow Creek, slept in broken pieces, used Grace's kitchen after closing, and spent her afternoons calling suppliers, comparing prices, and learning that bulk cinnamon could apparently cost enough to insult a person personally. Yet something inside her had changed. Not the tiredness. That stayed, loyal as a stray dog. Not the fear either. Fear still followed her into the bank, into the county office, into the quiet moments when she wondered if taking on 100 boxes was ambition or arrogance wearing nicer shoes. But beneath it all, there was a line of steel she had not felt in years. On Thursday evening, she stood in Grace's kitchen with Noah beside her, both of them wearing aprons dusted with flour, while Lily sat at a corner table drawing blue suns on thank you cards for the church volunteers. Grace moved between the cafe and the kitchen, pretending she was not watching Emily build a small miracle between the prep sink and the double ovens. Timer, Noah said, holding up one finger like a tiny executive. Emily slid 2 trays of muffins from the oven, the heat blooming against her face. And for a moment the smell of banana, oats, and cinnamon filled the room so completely that the whole world seemed softer. Perfect, Noah said. Do not sound surprised, Emily replied. I am not surprised. I am quality control. Your sister has competition. From the table, Lily lifted her head. I am still the boss of Sons. Naturally, Grace said. A vital department. They laughed, and the sound settled into Emily's chest with almost painful sweetness. It had been so long since laughter in her life had not needed permission. At 9:12, while another batch cooled, Mrs. Donnelly from Maple Hollow Elementary came through the back door, carrying a stack of empty cardboard boxes she had saved from the office supply room. I thought these might help with transport, she said. Behind her came Linda from Willow Creek with 2 packs of disposable gloves and a roll of labels. Then Pastor Elaine with a clipboard and a calm expression that suggested she had organized enough church potlucks to survive the collapse of civilization. Emily stood frozen as they placed the supplies on the counter. You all did not have to do this. Pastor Elaine smiled. People rarely have to help. That is what makes it count. The sentence struck Emily harder than she expected. For years, Ryan had made help feel like debt and kindness feel like proof she was lacking. But here, in this warm kitchen with flour on the floor and her children nearby, help felt different. It felt like being witnessed without being pitted. Linda squeezed Emily's shoulder. You show up for everyone before sunrise. Let people show up for you once in a while. Emily looked down quickly, pretending to organize the gloves. The world was deeply annoying, yes, but every now and then it produced a Linda, which made it harder to give up on the species entirely. By 11:45, the prep work was done. The freezer held neat rows of oat bars ready for morning baking. Dry ingredients were measured and labeled. Delivery boxes were stacked by the back door. Noah had fallen asleep with his head on his folded arms at the corner table, and Lily was curled against Grace's coat, one hand still holding a blue crayon. Emily stood alone for a moment in front of the ovens, her reflection faint in the stainless steel. She looked older than 34 tonight. Pale, tired, hair slipping from its clip, flour streaked across one cheek. But she also looked like someone who had stopped waiting to be rescued. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Ryan appeared. Madison says you are doing some church event. Do not overpromise and embarrass the kids. Emily read it without the old tremor. Then she turned the screen dark, picked up a clean towel, and wiped down the counter until it shone. Saturday morning began at 3:28, when Emily's alarm rang in the dark apartment, and she opened her eyes before the second chime, already listening for the children. Noah was asleep on the couch with one arm hanging over the edge, his mouth slightly open, the way it had been when he was 4 and still believed monsters could be defeated by leaving the hallway light on. Lily was curled beneath the blue blanket, one sock missing again, because the child apparently had a private war against pears. Emily stood there for one breath, watching them sleep in the pale glow from the kitchen clock. 100 boxes waited on the other side of the morning. Rent still existed. Bills still existed. Ryan's messages still existed in her phone, unread now, stacked like junk mail from a life she was no longer required to answer. But for the first time in years, those things did not feel like the whole story. She moved quietly, dressed in jeans, sneakers, and the clean white sweatshirt Grace had bought her with Carter and Kids Kitchen printed across the front in navy letters. Emily had protested when Grace gave it to her, naturally, because accepting gifts had become one more Olympic event for exhausted women with pride. Grace had only said, branding is not charity, and shoved it into her hands. By 4:05, Emily was unlocking the cafe's back door with the strawberry key. The kitchen lights flickered on over stainless steel counters already lined with paper boxes, labels, gloves, trays, and measured dry ingredients. The room was cold at first, then slowly warmed as the ovens came alive. Emily washed her hands, tied on her apron, and began. Muffin batter first, banana oat, then apple cinnamon. Granola bars after that, pressed into sheet pans and cut while still warm enough to smell like brown sugar and toasted oats. She moved quickly but carefully, checking temperatures, cooling racks, labels, counts. 12 boxes became 24. 24 became 50. 50 became 76. At 5:40, Grace arrived with coffee and her hair in a knot that suggested she had fought a pillow and lost. Please tell me you slept, Grace said. I blinked in several meaningful ways. That is deeply not sleep. It had sleep-like qualities. Grace handed her coffee and looked around the kitchen, at the trays cooling in perfect rows. Her expression softened before she could hide it. "You are doing it." Emily wanted to believe her, but she did not let herself answer until box number 100 was closed, labeled, and stacked by the door at 6:52. For a moment, the whole kitchen went still. Not silent, exactly. The ovens hummed. The refrigerator clicked. Rainwater dripped from Grace's boots onto the mat. But inside Emily, something quiet and enormous shifted into place. She had done it. Not imagined it. Not hoped toward it. Done it. At 7:05, Pastor Elaine pulled up behind the cafe in a church van, followed by Linda in her sedan and Mrs. Donnelly in a station wagon with one taillight out. They loaded boxes into the vehicles like a tiny, sleep-deprived army of competence. When Emily reached for the last stack, Pastor Elaine touched her arm. "Ride with me. You should see them receive it." Emily almost refused. There was always another counter to wipe, another tray to wash, another reason to remain useful instead of visible. But Grace took the stack from her hands. "Go. The dishes will survive without your martyrdom." The fellowship hall at Maple Hollow Community Church was already bright when they arrived, filled with folding tables, coffee urns, volunteer name tags, and the damp wool smell of winter coats. People turned as the boxes came in. Someone clapped once, then others joined, not dramatically, not like a movie, but warmly, awkwardly, sincerely, which was somehow worse for Emily's ability to maintain composure. Pastor Elaine lifted one box and said, "These were made before sunrise by a mother in our community who is building something with her own 2 hands." Emily looked down fast, but not before she saw Noah and Lily in the doorway with Mrs. Alvarez, still in their coats, eyes wide. Grace must have called them. Noah ran to her first, stopping just short of crashing into the boxes, because quality control had standards. Lily wrapped both arms around Emily's waist and whispered, "We made the Muffin Army." Emily laughed, and this time she did not swallow the tears that came with it. Noah looked up at her sweatshirt, then at the room full of people opening boxes, smiling, eating, talking. His voice was quiet when he said, "Mom, you did not just make food. You made us safe." The words struck deeper than praise, deeper than sales, deeper than anything Ryan could ever take credit for or away. Emily knelt and pulled both children close. Across the hall, through the blur of warm lights and steam rising from coffee cups, she saw families eating breakfast she had made, volunteers beginning their day with something from her hands, and her children standing inside a future that no longer looked like fear. She had thought she was building a business to survive. Somewhere before sunrise, without fanfare, she had started building a home no one could evict from inside them. For the rest of that Saturday, Emily moved through the fellowship hall in a strange state of disbelief, accepting thank yous with both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, because she did not trust herself to stand still without something to hold. People came back for second muffins. Volunteers asked whether she catered meetings. A woman from the county literacy program wanted 20 boxes for a Tuesday training. Mr. Feldman, who apparently attended the church and had chosen not to mention it because retired accountants enjoy revealing plot twists at inconvenient times, handed her the business card of a local nonprofit that helped small food businesses apply for microloans. "Do not panic," he said when he saw her face. "It is information, not a marriage proposal." Emily laughed, and the sound surprised her. Across the room, Noah was explaining to Pastor Elaine that the oat bars stacked better than muffins, while Lily handed out thank you cards with blue suns to anyone who looked even vaguely available. Grace stood near the coffee urn with Mrs. Donnelly and Linda, watching Emily with the protective satisfaction of women who had seen another woman crawl out of a hole and were fully prepared to throw a folding chair at anyone who tried to push her back in, metaphorically speaking, because apparently public venues prefer less dramatic furniture management. By noon, all 100 boxes were gone. The church kitchen was wiped clean, and Emily had 12 new names in her notebook. Not orders. Yet. Possibilities. Possibilities had once frightened her more than failure. Failure was familiar. It had bills, fatigue, and Ryan's voice narrating every mistake. Possibility asked her to imagine herself larger than survival, and that felt almost rude. When she finally returned to the apartment, the children fell asleep within minutes. Noah on the couch with his shoes still on, and Lily curled beside him under the blue blanket. Emily stood over them in the quiet living room, her sweatshirt stained with flour and coffee, her hair coming loose, her body heavy with the kind of exhaustion that lived in bone. Then she checked her phone. There were messages from Grace, Linda, Pastor Elaine, 2 teachers, the literacy program, and 1 missed call from Ryan. For a moment, her thumb hovered over his name. The old Emily would have called back immediately, trained by years of tension to answer before the second demand arrived. The woman standing in that small apartment now looked at her sleeping children, at the notebook on the counter, at the strawberry key beside the sink, and did not call. An hour later, Ryan called again. This time, Emily stepped into the hallway so the children would not wake, pulling the door softly behind her. "What do you need, Ryan?" she asked. There was a pause, as if he had expected a different voice, one more apologetic and easier to steer. Madison said the church thing went well. Emily looked down the stairwell window at the gray afternoon settling over Maple Hollow. "It did. I heard people are making a big deal out of it. People were kind. Do not let it go to your head." There it was, smaller than she remembered, almost tired in its predictability. Once, that sentence would have slipped under her skin and rearranged the furniture inside her mind. Now it landed on the hallway carpet between them, dull and useless. "I am not," she said. "I am letting it go into invoices, supply lists, and a savings account." Ryan exhaled sharply. "You always do this now." "Do what?" "Talk like you do not need anyone." Emily leaned against the wall, feeling the cold paint through her sweatshirt. She thought of Grace's key, Noah's labels, Lily's blue. Sons, Linda's defense, Mrs. Donnelly's saved boxes, Pastor Elaine's van, Mr. Feldman's patient pencil. She thought of all the people who had shown up, and all the years Ryan had mistaken isolation for independence because it suited him. "That is not what I learned," she said quietly. "I learned I do not need someone who needs me small." Silence followed. Not the beautiful kind from Willow Creek. A different one. The sound of a man finding no easy door back into a room he had abandoned. "Emily," he said, softer now. She closed her eyes. Part of her had waited years to hear his voice lose certainty. She had imagined it would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like setting down a bag she had carried too long and realizing she did not have to throw it at him to be free of it. "I have to go," she said. "The kids are sleeping." She ended the call and stood in the hallway for one more breath. Inside the apartment, Noah murmured in his sleep, and Lily's sock lay abandoned near the coffee table, undefeated as ever. Emily opened the door and stepped back into the small warm room, not as a woman who had proved Ryan wrong, though she had, but as a mother who had finally begun proving herself right.